welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today I am doing Korea part 2. In this video, I'll be covering temples and other older places in Korea, as well as a vintage market, Lotte World. And then we also went up a cable car to go up to the top of a mountain there to get a big overlook on Seoul, so that was super fun. So that's what you'll see in this video. I'm also going to include prices where I can, because I know that pricing is really helpful for people to know when traveling. It's not a weird flex of me saying how much money I have. When I am watching people travel in these travel vlogs, the fact that I have no idea what they're paying for anything and can't gauge at all what they're spending on their trip or what I would spend if I was to travel there as well, I find frustrating. So I like to share that transparently with you guys. But with that, let's go ahead and hop into the footage. Our first stop on today's tour is the Bukchon Hanok Village. This is just a very traditional area of housing, and it has a beautiful view, as you can see, out into the city off the hill. As you can see, it is really crowded here, and it is actually still a residential area. There's lots of signs telling people to keep their voices down and their music down and stuff like that. When you are visiting areas like this, just do remember that a lot of times people do live here, and it's good to be respectful of their living spaces. Next stop on the tour is Gyeongbokgung Palace. Here you can see we're kind of in the main entrance, and these palaces were really interesting in contrast to Bangkok's palaces, because Bangkok's palaces, everything was kind of condensed in together, and there's so much open space in these. And I just thought that was a really interesting difference between the two. The tour guide told us that they have had to rebuild parts of this palace due to various wars and fires and things like that. Here we're going in through the main entrance, and you can see all this beautiful painting work up at the top here. We got super lucky on this tour, and it was just us two and the guide. She said that we're here during the super off season for English tours, which makes sense because we haven't had very many people on any of our tours here. She said this is usually a busier season for Chinese people and people from other parts of Asia who have not seen snow. So just an interesting thing to, I guess, note if you're thinking of traveling to Korea in January, which is when I was here. And then looking around, the lighting here is just really beautiful and warm because we're here relatively early in the morning, and as a result there's also fewer people here, which is nice. Overall, this area felt really empty until we were ready to actually head out and leave, where it was definitely a fuller place. Here, where these decorative steps are, is where the king would be carried. The middle is not steps because obviously the king's carried, so he's not walked, so it's the space for the people carrying to walk up, and he goes over this seal here. Here we're entering the main throne area, so all of these posts that you're seeing here, the stone ones, would demark where each rank of nobility was supposed to stand. Again, I just love how open these are. It felt very grand in the fact that it's big. This is definitely, again, a contrast to what I saw in Thailand, because these are simpler wooden buildings that are not as decorated, but they're still really beautiful and intricate in their wooden paint and decoration. And then this here is the actual throne area. Again, you can see all the intricacy, and I guess the sun and the moon in the backdrop behind the throne represented royalty in Korea. And then over here by this water area, this is where the party or banquet hall was. As you can see, this looks like this would be a lot of fun. She said that you would have people in boats, and I don't know why, but an area with its own private lake with boats and a big house sounds like a really fun place to party. I also thought this area was really pretty with the gazebo in the middle of the pond with the bridge. I thought it was quite lovely. And then I also really like how you can see the mountain in the background. Because the buildings are so flat, the mountain still feels really towering and magnificent. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like the architecture here really highlights and features the mountain. And then once we enter this area, I believe we're in the living quarters of the palace, where the king and the queen would live. They lived in separate bedrooms, as is actually pretty normal around the time period this was built. Across the board. This is also true in European countries. Again, it just feels like there's a lot of space. I am also really curious how this feels in the spring, with the trees and bushes and stuff being bare. This felt actually kind of empty almost, and I wonder if it feels a little bit fuller and more opulent in the spring, summer, and fall when it is actually all grown in. And here we have another perk of going with a tour guide. She knew exactly where was best to stand for the changing of the guard. Changing of the guard ceremonies are actually really common. A lot of places you travel, you can find them in the US. I've seen them in Europe. I've kind of seen them everywhere I've traveled, so it was interesting to see. We saw changing of the guard in Thailand as well as here, and so it's just really interesting that the changing of a guard seems to be a fairly universal custom. What is interesting here, however, is when I've been in the United States and seen the changing of the guard, they are actually still people in the military. My understanding is these people are kind of more just actors. They're not actually like stationed here to really like guard the place. And most of the places I think I've seen in Europe with this is some sort of actual military. So I just found it interesting. She said that Korea just doesn't feel the need for guards, which totally makes sense to me. Actually made me kind of wonder why more places where it is such a ceremonial thing don't use that, but I also don't have much military background myself. So I also would say that I don't actually have the ability to fully grasp things like this. I am hoping somewhere here I caught the sound really well so we can stop here and you can actually hear what it sounded like. The audio input of the changing of the guards was actually really neat, and I loved the visuals, but I also really, really liked the sound. Our next stop, we start at Naksan Park, which has an old wall and overlooks the city. This had gorgeous views and was a really nice walk down. Next, we headed to Iwa Mural Village, which is an area in Seoul that has a bunch of murals. It's also like in a really hilly part of the city, so that was kind of fun to see. A lot of the way the alleyways and stuff here were reminded me actually of almost like Mykonos or Santorini, which I thought was really interesting because they're so far away and obviously very different climates and stuff like that, but the way everything's like stacked on each other and the wires and stuff really reminded me of that. As far as the murals in this area, they were like fine. That sounds so snobby, but being where I am from in Seattle, we have a lot of really, really, really impressive murals, and so to me the murals here were just kind of okay. Definitely fun, definitely worth seeing, but I feel like just in general America has such a strong street art culture that we just, I guess, have better street art. I mean, it's also that I feel like just knowing what I know about Korean culture, I don't feel like they're into graffiti as much as we are, or really at all. In fact, I don't know if I saw any graffiti the whole time we were here, now I think about it. So it makes sense that America might have a slightly stronger street art game. We're about to see a lot of walking footage. We walked a lot on this part and it was actually really nice. I talked to our guide about a ton of different things and it was really, really delightful. My favorite things about guides, as I've said before, is getting to talk to them and just learn more about their culture and learn more about them, because people grow up in very different parts of the world and there's still so much we have in common. We actually, it was funny, we were talking about cost of living and how we can't afford houses and stuff, and how if we were to afford houses we have to move away from where the jobs are, and I just kind of thought that was really interesting that we both have similar, I guess, situations to each other on that. And yeah, I always love talking about cost of living with people from other parts of the world because it's so different across the board. We also talked a little bit about pets because I hadn't seen very many pets, and she does not have pets, but she said that pets in Korea are just generally smaller and we're probably not in areas where there's a ton of pets, but usually they're more like small dogs and cats. One of the other interesting things we talked about that was so funny to me, because I had actually noticed this. I just noticed that everybody wears what looks like comfort shoes in Korea. I also noticed this in Thailand. Thailand, I saw a few more heels, but I was wearing a pair of American Duchess shoes with a slight heel that are really comfortable for me and I can walk around just fine in. But she asked me if I was comfortable, if I was okay walking, and it just kind of led into a conversation about like heels and comfort footwear. And how in Korea they basically all wear comfortable shoes, except for if they're like the only time they wear heels is when they go out to the club. And she was just very, I guess, fascinated by the fact that Americans wear uncomfy shoes all the time, like to work and stuff. Just kind of a difference that I thought was funny. And honestly, I only wear comfortable shoes, so I'm totally with the Koreans on this one. But it was definitely something I noticed across Asia, just not the uncomfortable footwear I'm used to seeing in America and Europe. But yeah, we just walked and talked and she showed us some things, and then we went to a cafe and sat down and got drinks together, and we basically had time to do all this because she said usually this tour is much bigger and so it just takes longer with more people, and that we didn't stop to take pictures every few seconds. I guess other people do, which is funny to me. It was also fun to talk to her about all the different tours she does. This is just one of many. She does DMZ tours, she does ski tours, which sounds super fun. I guess unless you're skiing with a bunch of people who don't know how to ski. It was just really interesting to hear, and she talked a lot about like the different cultures she interacts with, because like usually like groups of people come in, so she interacts with people all over the world, and it was just fun to get her take on kind of all these different cultures from her perspective as a Korean, and I really, really enjoyed that. Another thing we talked about, like as far as cultures, is my sister and I talked to her a bit about like our first day in Korea and feeling a little bit basically just culture shock. And it was funny to hear her talk about some of the things she admired about American culture, which are the opposite things that I admire in Korean culture. And I just think it's really funny how when you can kind of travel, you just sometimes have these like rosier feelings about other cultures than yours. People feel the reverse as well, and I just think that's really funny and interesting and something I hadn't necessarily considered before. I don't know if she's listening to this, but if you are, big hello. I loved this tour so much and I felt like I learned so much from you. And then from the village, we continued our descent into actually the same area as the big fabric market I visited on my first tour, as well as the East Gate. So here are a couple of views from that. From here we were dropped into Gyeongbokgung Market, which is a street food market, a huge street food market. There are so many vendors here, and as you can see, it's packed with people. Well, as you can see, there's just tons of people sitting here and eating. I do think this is a must stop and eat at if you are in Seoul. There just were a lot of foods here to try. And it was a really accessible place to eat street food because they're used to tourists. There were a lot of famous food stalls here. We did not choose to eat at one because they had really, really long lines. But if trying famous foods is your thing, you could definitely choose to wait in that line. My sister and I were hungry from all the walking we did on our tour, so we were just headed straight to wherever we could find some food. We got a few dishes at the stall we stopped at. A reminder that in Korea, walking and eating is considered rude, so you sit and you eat at the street vendors. In the States, you would grab it to go and you would eat it as you walk, but that is not the thing here. We got gimbap, and we got some dumplings, and some glass noodles. Everything was really, really fresh and really, really delicious. And next we went to a cat cafe. Here is the lineup of the cats we're meeting today. There are 50 here. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty hesitant to go to a cat cafe just because in general, tourists and animals are not good combos and do not equal well cared for animals. However, looking around here, I felt like most cats were pretty well taken care of. There was maybe one or two that looked a little bit rough, but honestly, among 50 cats, you're gonna have a few with health problems. Like, I think just like one or two are matted, and among 50 cats, the fact that only 2 are matted is pretty good. And as we know with cats, some of them do not like a brush. Since all the cats overall looked really, really good and in great condition, I generally was a little bit less worried. But it is something to consider when you do travel, when you're going to animal things, is just, you know, consider what condition the animals were in. And also watching the staff interact with these animals, it was clear they absolutely adored these cats. And like knew each of their personalities and like the things that each cat liked as far as being pet. It was also really funny because I could tell there were a ton of people in this cafe who don't interact with cats regularly just because of the way they like pet and approach cats. I do think that's like the biggest thing is that was like, I guess, like a red flag, is just that anybody who doesn't interact with cats a ton and maybe is more used to like dogs don't totally know how to understand the animal. However, I will say there were plenty of places the cats could go that were completely out of reach from people. So they did have places to escape to. I really enjoyed, I had never pet a naked cat is not their hairless cat, so that was a lot of fun. They were wearing their little sweaters and they were kind of velvety. It was also just kind of fun to watch all the cats' behaviors. When I'm walking around and you see the plastic bags, when you come in, they have you put your stuff in a plastic bag so the cats can't pee on them. Back here is where some of the hairless cats are. This hairless cat was my favorite. It was very, very nice. The one back there in the green, though, that one started a cat fight while we were there, and then he tried to start another cat fight in front of me at some point, and because I know cats, I knew how to diffuse it. And the cats loved hiding under my skirt. And then our other favorite was there was this black cat walking around that very spiteful cat, very like 10 out of 10 spicy. He would just like walk by and spray and pee on anybody's stuff if they left it out for more than like a second. It was funny is like kind of the wrong word, but I kind of thought it was funny. The cat cafe was an interesting experience, and as far as like the cafes go, Cats is probably the safest on being treated well. And for dinner, we went to a Korean barbecue place by our hotel. It was so good. My sister was very excited because that copper thing you see is like it sucks up all the fumes, and I guess that doesn't always happen, so she was pumped. My sister was in charge of cooking the meat to start. She did a great job. We actually did not need any help from anybody to cook this, which I was very proud of. I mean, it was her that made that possible, but I was proud nonetheless. And then after dinner, we decided to go to the Myeongdong night market. So all the stores and stuff are around here at night. It's all happening. Our first stop was this fun accessory store. There were so many earrings. Like, this is just the upstairs portion. This isn't even like half of all the jewelry and stuff they had. I spent way too much money here, but it was so fun to look at all these things. They had some really unique and special pieces, and I was very, very, very impressed and had a lot of fun in here. For dessert, we were both very excited. We got souffle pancakes. We got a strawberry and a blueberry, and both were delicious. Souffle pancakes are now one of my favorite meals. As you can see, it was like layered. It had a filling. It was like a cake. It was 10 out of 10. Lots of whipped cream. Loved. The next morning, this is our day off from tours, but we went to a cafe and we got a very intense strawberry waffle and then these like matcha ice cream flake things with red bean in them, as well as our usual lattes and such. Today we took our longest subway ride. The subway actually goes above ground to go across the river, which is where we are here. We are headed out to Lotte World. While walking through the station, we came across the Trevi Fountain, a full-on reproduction. I would call this yassified for sure. It is definitely a little bit more, I don't know what the word to use, than the actual Trevi Fountain, but. And here we're fully in the Lotte Park area. So they have a whole big indoor skating rink here. There's like the castle floating above it, and the whole amusement park you can see is up there. We took the escalator up, and here's our first look at Lotte World. This part of Lotte World is inside, and it is very Disney World-esque. I will say it doesn't have like the extra small proportions of Disney World that's like meant for children. It definitely has just kind of fun theme park vibes. I figured I'll take you along on this ride. We only did one ride here. Neither me or my sister are one for rides. And with my back problems, I extra didn't want to risk any jerky rides because if I mess up my back, I might have to go to the hospital, and we don't want to figure that out. So this one we took was the hot air balloon ride. It's very, very quiet and nice ride, but gives you a great view of everything from up above, and I really, really enjoyed this ride. We were in the balloon with a couple and their child. When the balloon went up, both me and my sister aren't huge heights people. Both of us reacted a little when the balloon jerked weird, and it made us feel better that the couple kind of overreacted as well, so it wasn't just us. They have a lot of rides very similar to your standard amusement park. You can see the teacups there. There's like a monorail. I don't know what to call that other than a Splash Mountain look-alike, the thing right there. And it was really fun to see everybody using the rides that me and my sister were not going to go on. We queued for, I think, an hour to take this ride, and we just weren't really very interested in waiting in lines for tons of rides, especially considering we are not huge ride people. And there is an outside part of the park. I believe this is the Magic Island. So we walked out to just kind of walk around and see what was out there. They had a fun, very Disney-esque castle here, and walking around it felt like a little fake folk village with lots of different style buildings that I would not say always match in architecture. And that big tower there is Lotte Tower, which I think is one of the tallest buildings, if not the tallest building in Seoul. It was kind of fun to see an amusement park set in such a city area, just because that is not my experience when I've been to amusement parks in America. And that's it for today. We kind of were pretty low-key today to give us some time to rest and stuff. Alright, we're on our last full day at Seoul. At this cafe, we really love the sandwiches. We actually might have gone here before. I believe this is a twosome place. And the teas were very good as well. Always nice to get something hot. And then we're kind of sticking to our neighborhood where our hotel is in Myeongdong. Here though, we're headed over to Nasam Cable Car. Alright, we have gotten our tickets for the cable car and we get to head up the mountain. We lucked out and we're the only 2 people besides the attendant in this cable car, which is super great. Again, I really just enjoy expansive views of cities, and we definitely got that from the cable car. And I am so curious what this looks like in fall and spring. It must be so stunning here. In winter, it's still pretty. And we did look out and we got here on a clear day. If it is not a clear day, don't do this, is what I've heard, because the air pollution in Seoul can be so bad. Sometimes you can't see very far. We lucked out and I think we were on like a perfect 10 out of 10 clarity for today. At the top, there is kind of like the Love Walk tourist type of attraction. These are always very interesting to me. I don't understand them, to be quite frank. I don't understand the like signifying of a walk to put to remember love. I don't look down on anybody who does it. I just will say I personally don't get it. But it was always really interesting to see spaces that have walks like this. The tower is closed today, so we won't be going up it, but obviously it is still here. And the views were good enough that I actually don't think you need to go up the tower unless you really want to. I mean, we would have gone up the tower if it was open, but it was closed. This was a fun square to walk around, views on all sides. Honestly, the top of this mountain was bigger and flatter than I expected. But look at these city views. We lucked out so much today. I can't believe the clarity. I didn't really actually expect to see this much if we came up because, yeah, it's not known for being the most clear city to see things from. So I was pretty excited, and yeah, I love cityscapes. They have some nice cafes up here where you can sit and enjoy the view. However, they're really expensive. We had just eaten at the cafe down below and we're pretty full, so we did not stop at these. But we did stop for another view. Finding one of the binocular things that worked was actually quite a challenge. I did find one that worked, but after a bunch of tries because they were so full of coins. As you can see here, there is another kind of like big lock area. So this is actually funny. I've never used one of these before. I was kind of excited. I've always like seen them around as a kid, but never, put the quarters in and actually made it work. As far as I remember, I'm sure my parents will tell me otherwise, but it was kind of fun to look through. And we were on our last day, so we were really trying to use up some of our coins at this point. And I did manage to get my GoPro to work a little bit on looking through. I thought this particular area was interesting because everything was so uniform. So I hope you enjoyed that fun little view through the viewing thing in case you've never done it before either. After this, we took the cable car back down. The cable car on the way down was definitely more crowded. I wouldn't say it was like fully crowded or anything like that. It was definitely more crowded. But our timing, we lucked out and we were the first in line for this one. So as a result, we got to have a good spot on our way down. On our way back down, I came across this mother of pearl inlaid door. It was stunning. I couldn't quite figure out what it went to, but there was a camera system yelling at me the whole time I was filming it. So for lunch, we stopped in a cafe. I got another aid. I can't remember the flavor of this one. And we both got sandwiches. I really liked their sandwiches here. Like in Korea in general, I thought they were delicious. Our last stop is Dongmyo. I am sure I am butchering this pronunciation. I could not find a pronunciation guide anywhere, but this is a giant flea market, essentially. So this is going to be vintage stuff, antiques, and flea market stuff in general. In here was a more antique vintage shop. They had some really beautiful things here, and I did pick up a couple things. Before visiting the market, we stepped into this shrine area. This was built around 1601-ish and absolutely beautiful building. And it's a shrine actually to, I believe, a Chinese general, which is really interesting being in Korea. She said that there's lots of shrines to Chinese generals Here there is a wooden statue specifically of the general this is devoted to, which you can sort of see here. After that, we entered back into the market. It was very overwhelming here. I mean, I never need more clothes, but I just kind of knew the clothes here wouldn't super float my boat, so that was not what I was on the lookout for. However, it is always so fun to be in flea market type places. I will always be a sucker for a flea market no matter where in the world I am, and visiting flea markets in different countries is one of my favorite things to do. I feel like I did a horrible job filming this, but this shop is wild. It is literally just stacks and stacks and stacks of charger cords. Here we're in some narrow alleys. I definitely think you could do this without a guide. A guide was really helpful because she helped us get some historical information on the things we bought as well as haggle. So definitely would recommend a guide. I think it was definitely an advantage, but I think you could definitely be here without one. It was also nice. The sun was out, which we did enjoy. Here was a stall that definitely had like kind of some ceramics and stuff that I would consider very antique shop, even in like America and stuff. Obviously, these are just very different than what you would find in America because it's a whole different country's antiques. But there was a lot of pottery here and a lot of different things that intrigued me. I thought these peacocks were really fun. The bedazzled chicken was fun. I did pick up one thing at this booth, which you will not see in my haul. I picked up a tiny tea set for a friend. And here's another ceramics-based shop. I didn't get anything at this shop either, mainly because this shop only had giant pieces and there was no way I was going to figure out how to bring anything like that home in my luggage, nor do I have the room for it. But of course, I will always love looking at pottery. It will never get old for me. We also walked by a bunch of toy and stationery wholesalers. We're actually very, very close to the fabric wholesale market I went to on my last video. This is all kind of in the same area, so definitely recommend checking out all these areas when you're in Korea. They're off the same subway stop, and there's definitely lots of like kind of fun things to see. Another cool part of this tour was dinner. We got this like squid egg dish that was super delicious. I'm forgetting the name of it, as well as it comes with like a bunch of sides like soups and stuff. That was absolutely delicious and spicy, and this was the perfect last meal in Korea, and this was really, really fun. It was so fun to get to know our guide here as well as who was on the tour with us. And then the last thing we got was we finally got one of the red bean fish pastries. I guess that's technically not the last thing. We got these, which I will find the name of them, but you smash them with a hammer. They were not very good. They were kind of like waffle cones in white chocolate mixtures. And then for our last view of Seoul at night, our hotel is back behind there, the Pacific Hotel, and it has this cute little Seoul sign out front. And for the morning, we headed back out on the bus to go to the airport. This is the same bus we used to come in, so it was $13 a person, and it went really smooth. Again, don't get a taxi, just get a bus. At the airport, we did lunch at Dunkin'. We opened with Dunkin' and we closed with Dunkin'. The egg salad was excellent, and we got some mochi donuts, and then we also got drinks. I got the same drink I had gotten at the very first Dunkin' we stopped in. And then from there, it is time to take off and head back to Seattle. I had such a fun time on this trip, but I'm definitely ready to go home. And I have two last airplane meal reviews for you. This one meal here was a Korean noodle dish I totally put together wrong, and I put soup in it that was not supposed to go in it, and the spicy sauce was so spicy that I didn't put that much of it in there, so this was maybe not the best meal. It did come with dumplings though. I really like the dumplings. And then for breakfast, I got my last bit of rice porridge, our congee, before we go. I love congee so much and I will miss it. It is a huge goal to learn how to make it so I can enjoy it at my own home. And now we are landing in Seattle. We've arrived back home, and I am definitely ready to be home, and now I'll catch you in the outro. All right, we are wrapping up. I enjoyed both the tours we did with guides this time. Big shout out to Laura and Nori. I don't even know if they'll watch this. I enjoyed chatting with both of them so much. One of my favorite parts about Korea was talking to these two guides and getting to know a lot of things that you don't get to know if you don't talk to people. I really enjoyed that, and of course I enjoyed the sights we saw and the vintage we bought. I will always say like a highlight is talking to people. So I'm gonna go over the life-changing things I learned while traveling. I think every trip kind of changes how you see the world a little bit. So first I'm gonna talk about safety. So it's really interesting because when I travel in Europe, nobody asks me if I'm gonna be safe. When I talked about going to Thailand and South Korea, people were constantly like, oh, is it safe there? Is it safe there? Is it safe there? And both cities are actually safer than where I live and most of the US. both where we were in Thailand and where we were in South Korea. Well, South Korea as a whole is one of the safest countries in the world as far as violent crime goes and stealing and petty crime and stuff like that. And then Thailand also has fairly low instances of that. They do have pickpockets, but not the same way that they do in Europe. I didn't feel like I had to like be constantly aware like I am in Europe. So the only thing to note for Thailand technically rates lower on safety than Seattle. However, it's due to government corruption. So if you're not doing anything that's going to involve you with government corruption, I think you should be fine safety there. I will say both of these places were the safest I've ever felt. I would go back to both these places completely solo, no problem, no worries. Korea, there's not a ton of pickpockets from what I could tell anywhere. Certain touristy areas in Bangkok, there definitely were pickpockets. Pickpockets, the general rule is be smarter than the other tourists, and you'll be fine. So safety-wise, I just want to say like both of these places are really safe, and we need to start examining why we believe non-Western countries aren't as safe as Western countries when both of these rank safer than the US, and they actually rank safer than Rome, Paris, and all of that. So just something I think is important to know, and I knew that both these places were safer in my mind, but until I was there, I didn't realize how much safer I felt there compared to other places I've traveled and I guess where I live. These are kind of some silly things. This is the first time I've had like a bidet access for a long period of time, and I'm now going to get a bidet attachment for my toilet. Bidets are life-changing. I actually think it's wild. We still use toilet paper. If you haven't tried a bidet, find somewhere, try a bidet, see if it works for you. I hope this isn't too TMI, but I have a lot of stomach issues where a bidet is very nice for. So I will definitely be getting an install. A second kind of silly life changer is a shoehorn, specifically a really tall shoehorn. Both the hotels we stayed in had long shoehorns, so I could actually stand and put on my shoes, and I didn't have to like some of the crumply positions you get in to put in your shoes really hurt my back, and so actually having a shoehorn was really helpful. So I'm going to be getting an extra long wooden shoehorn. And then last was just the cafe culture in Korea was really fun. I feel like people like go to them and stay there like a reasonable amount of time, rather than I feel like a lot of times when I'm in coffee shops in Seattle, you go and like most of the tables for 4 people are like taken up by one guy and his laptop who's sitting there for like hours and hours and hours. So I really like enjoyed, I guess, how easy it felt like to actually go and sit at a cafe. And I actually, while the to-go cup thing snafu, you could call it, was rough to start with. I actually have, because in America they usually give you a to-go cup, I had not really experienced how much I enjoy sitting in a cafe and actually drinking my whole drink as opposed to taking it on the go. So that was just something that I enjoyed, and I'm gonna kind of hopefully take some of that peace into my life and actually like sit at a cafe and enjoy a cup of coffee occasionally. I just really felt like it helped me slow down and not go. And by a cup of coffee, I mean a cup of tea. I don't drink coffee. I'm way too anxious of a person for coffee. Those are just kind of like the little things that changed my perspective on this trip. I will also say I now have like 6,000 places I want to go all over Asia after traveling it. I enjoyed it so much. It was so budget friendly. And since I live on the West Coast, it's way easier to get over there. So I first of all, I really want to go back to Bangkok. I don't feel like I spent nearly enough time there, and I think there's a gajillion things I could see there. I don't know if I would go back to Seoul immediately just because we spent more time there and I felt like we saw a lot of stuff, but I would love to go to some of like the southern areas of South Korea. Japan is on the list. Cambodia is on the list now. I would probably go to Vietnam too. I would love to travel in China once the COVID situation is figured out. I like literally have a million places in my brain and they all just left. India, Sri Lanka. I mean, I would love to go to Maldives. Yeah, I think honestly traveling there was so fun and easy. Like me and my younger sister were talking and we felt like this was the easiest, smoothest trip we have ever taken. And of course, like some of that is dependent on the airlines, but we used non-American airlines, and I do think there's something to be said for that. Like in both these places, it felt like they valued efficiency and stuff like airports. And so everything with the airports went so fast. Even though we were traveling on some really busy days, since we were traveling the day after the big Lunar New Year day, I also really value efficiency. So I feel like I just really enjoyed that aspect. And yeah, things just went so smooth and were no hassle. And of course, like my money goes a lot further there than it does was in Europe. If you are thinking of traveling and you can't afford Europe, just definitely consider Asia. Like I said, both these places I felt safer and were cheaper than Europe. So that is kind of, I guess, my last thoughts on this. So with that, that concludes all of my travel vlogs for now. I'm sure we will catch some later this year. I'm still deciding where I'm going. And then as always, subscribe and stick around. I am usually a vintage channel. I have sewing videos every other week. And then of course, if you comment or like this video, it really helps me out. And I will see you next time. Bye!